Welcome back to Awaken Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and I want to thank all of you for joining us again today. As I said last time, I'm going to try and make these intros a bit more concise, while still letting you know how incredibly appreciative I am for all of you tuning in and sharing this podcast with your friends. For those that are just joining us for the first time this week, I want to give you a very special welcome. I think you're in for a pretty fun episode. You listeners are and will continue to be the most important part of this podcast, and I am incredibly grateful, so much more than I could ever actually say, for each and every one of you. So please remember that if you have any suggestions for topics or guests, I do listen to the listeners, and I look forward to hearing from you. You can contact me on our website or on Twitter at Awaken Exchanges, or even on Instagram, as I'm trying to build that up a little bit again now, at Awakened Exchanges. Today's guest is the Funkboy himself, Ivan Bodley. Ivan has performed with over 50 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees and in over a dozen Broadway shows. He's been a bassist and a musical director to the stars for over 35 years. And that's after he already had a successful career as a music producer. I don't even know how to get into his story. You have to hear it from him. So his story is beyond fascinating, and I barely was able to scratch the surface in our time together. His book, Am I Famous Yet? Memoir of a Working Class Rockstar, contains an incredible amount of stories and anecdotes. I truly hope you give it a read. You can find a link to it in the show notes, and I hope that you enjoy this exchange with him as much as I did. Now, before we get to the show, I want to thank each of you personally for your support. Just listening and sharing this podcast with your friends gives me a reason to keep providing the best content that I can. If you have the means and would like to contribute personally, please take a look at our Patreon page, where you will get access to exclusive content and deals. Your personal support there and at Awakened Vapes are pretty much the only means of funding for this podcast, so I truly hope you all know how much I appreciate you. As for our other sponsors, Awakened Vapes was the first of the Awakened brands and has been helping you modulate your high with CBD-only high-terpene vape products since 2019. Magic Mind, a magical combination of ingredients designed to help you improve your energy, focus, and productivity. And Genesis Pharms is, of course, still making the highest quality medicinal RSO, among many other fantastic products, available here in Oregon at your favorite dispensaries. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us wherever else you're listening. And if you can, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I know that every podcast says it, but that's because it really does help spread the word. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. All right, now stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Awakened Exchanges. I still can't say enough about Magic Mind. They have been nothing but generous and kind since reaching out to us, and when you add good people to a great product, you're certain to have a winning combination. Magic Mind has designed the world's first productivity drink, a morning ritual built to help the creative workers of the 21st century. Magic Mind's science-backed blend of matcha, nootropics, and adaptogens work together to get you into that flow state faster, all without the anxiety or jitters that can come with caffeine. All you get is the focus and productivity. So what else could you ask for? Well, visit magicmind.co/awake today and learn more about what this elixir can do for you. Better yet, use the promo code AWAKE20, that's AWAKE20, and get a total of 40% off your first order with that discount code. That comes to about $3 per bottle to help bring unbeatable focus and clarity to your life every single day. Next, we have Genesis Pharms. Founded on the belief in cannabis's ability to heal, Genesis Pharms is more than a brand. They're a compassionate community of like-minded folks that bring top-quality cannabis products made with love and care. You can find their products on the best dispensary shelves across the state of Oregon. Their RSO is the highest, most consistent quality in the state. Their tinctures are second to none, and their personal massage oil will have you and your partner coming back for more. Double entendre intended? Possibly. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram and ask for them in your local dispensary today. You can even learn more about Genesis Pharms by listening to Sean on our very own Awaken Exchanges episode number 3. That brings us to Awaken Vapes, bringing you the highest quality CBD vape cartridges since ringing in the new year back in 2019. I became passionate about cannabis after a car wreck left me with major migraines, and Western medicine had failed to alleviate the symptoms. After about 2 years, a very compassionate doctor decided to ask me if I'd ever smoked cannabis. Having only tried cannabis a handful of times in high school and college, it was this off-the-cuff recommendation that made me realize the amazing health benefits that we've been missing out from this wonderful plant. Please visit www.awakenvapes.com today, where we still offer our 3 custom terpene formulations, but now with an enhanced flavor profile to go along with those original, powerful effects. And don't forget, you can always email us about any wholesaling or white labeling opportunities. Last but definitely not least, the absolute best way for you to help support this podcast would be by joining our Patreon page. There you're going to get access to exclusive content and amazing merch deals, and you truly are the most important part of this podcast. So joining in the exchange is the absolute best way to become a part of it. Thank you, and I hope to see you all again here in the future. Welcome back to Awaken Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and I want to thank Ivan Bodley for joining us today. Welcome, Ivan.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself, because you are a fascinating subject, my friend.
Well, that's interesting. About myself, let's see. Well, the tagline on the bio says I'm a bass player, professional bass player, music director. I've performed with now 52 members, inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've appeared in 13 different Broadway shows. I'm a New York Blues Hall of Fame inductee, and that's it, I guess. You know, that's a career.
Just a little bit there. That's it, though.
Yeah. That's all. That's just a start.
All right. Well, then, if that's the start, when did you first start playing music yourself?
Well, you know, I dabbled with things kind of as a young kid, but nothing really stuck. Nothing really took, you know. So somewhere, you know, I was always interested in music as kind of just a fan, a listener, as an escape kind of thing. But somewhere around my senior year in high school, I finally picked up a bass guitar, and then something clicked. I was like, wait a minute, I think this is something I could do. I have a theory that you don't choose your instrument chooses you, because there's certain different personality types that go with lead guitar or lead vocals or bass or drums, you know. And apparently bass is mine, because it really spoke to me, and it became a lifelong pursuit right from that moment on.
So what were you trying out before the bass?
I dabbled like for, you know, I think in 7th grade I played piano for about 6 months. I think there was a couple of weeks of guitar lessons somewhere around there. The viola was an issue at somewhere in like 6th grade, I think, you know, for a hot minute. But like I said, nothing really stuck. Nothing really made sense to me and made me want to continue to follow through with it until I got to bass, and then it was suddenly like full steam ahead.
So bass was junior, senior year in high school, really started taking off.
Senior year in high school, yeah.
And who were some of the heroes that kind of inspired you after you kind of got that bug?
Well, you know, there's so many, and there continue to be so many, because there people are sort of evolving the instrument to this day kind of thing. But as I was starting out, I was sort of, the first bass things I was hearing were, one of the first bass lines I actually learned was by Rick James.
Okay.
You know, I saw him on the Midnight Special perform the song You and I, which is this little 4-note ostinato bass line. And a buddy of mine at my high school had a bass. I don't know if he made it or something, but it only had 2 strings on it. Only the bottom 2 strings. But those were the only 2 strings you needed to play this Rick James bass line. So I remember picking up this bass with 2 strings on it, and I was sort of able to pick out the line by ear. And that's when it started to sort of begin to click with me. Like, I kind of like what's going on here, and I think I can actually figure it out. Um, so then, the bass heroes at the time were Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius and John Entwistle from The Who and stuff like that. So those are the people I started sort of like listening to and aspiring towards. In addition to Larry Graham from Sly and the Family Stone and Graham Central Station, and James Jamerson from Motown, although at the time we didn't really know who the Funk Brothers were, all the Motown musicians. They weren't credited on any of the records up to that time. So
they were just like, they were the original session guys, really.
Right. Well, again, James Jamerson was the bass player on almost all of the early Motown recordings for the 60s. He was on almost all of those songs. Bob Babbitt played on a few more, but and then over at Stax, Booker T and the MGs were the house band over there. So Donald Duck Dunn was the bass player there. And again, I didn't know his name at the time. I just know that I was raised on Stax and Motown, and my mother was a big fan of Gladys Knight and the Pips and Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder. So I was absorbing all this stuff, kind of at warp speed. And then as I was starting to get functional on the instrument, I was starting to, incorporate those players' influences, again, without even necessarily knowing who they were.
And so Motown was a big influence for you, me as well. Yeah. I've still listened to it on a regular basis. What was your intention with the band setup? Were you trying to pursue a band, or what were you thinking when you were playing at that point?
It was hard to say, because I started so late. Most people start an instrument kind of much younger than I did. I was 17 when I first picked up a bass. So, when I'm out the door graduating high school, after being playing bass for, at that point, 9 months, just a school year at that point, I was in no position to go like, well, I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to music school. I didn't have that kind of career path in mind. And it was too early in sort of my development to realize that was something that I might want to do. So I ended up going to Tulane University in New Orleans as a biomedical engineering major.
Wow.
And I did biomedical engineering for about 2 years. And then I'm kind of looking around at my compatriots in the biomed department. And they were all sort of ROTC kind of people. And, I didn't really fit in with that crowd. And, wasn't really my scene. So I ended up getting a psych degree from Tulane. But the whole time I was there, I was really majoring in college radio. I became the music director of the college station, which was WTUL in New Orleans. And that's when I got really involved in the music scene in New Orleans. I got involved with working with the record companies who were promoting their product to my station and then reporting back to them in the trade journals, like what was playing, what we were playing. And as the artists would come through town, I would end up, being the person to liaison to get them to come down to the station to promote their concerts and interview them on the station kind of thing. So it kind of got me into the music business that way.
Oh, very cool.
So when I graduated Tulane, I ended up going to get a job at Epic Records in New York City. I started out, answering phones and making copies and all that kind of stuff. And then I kind of worked my way up to being the manager West Coast publicity for Epic, Portrait, and CBS Associated Labels, with the little corporate Amex card and the whole thing. So this was over a kind of a 3-year period, moved out to Los Angeles. And after I'd been in the music business for 3 years, I realized the music business has nothing to do almost with music. It's a marketing company. They could be selling soap. They could be selling sneakers. It didn't matter to them. So that's when I kind of said, all right, and I'd also been playing sort of semi-professionally during this whole period of time. I said, all right, let me try to see if I can possibly do something on the creative side, which meant sort of, turning back in my corporate Amex card and trying to see if I could make a go of it. It was a big leap of faith at the time, a big career change when I was about 24, 25, something like that. And that included deciding that then I needed to go back to music school and get the proper education that I really hadn't had because I kind of came to it so late. So that was the next step, Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Oh, very cool. So what was the semi-professional start that you had before?
Well, I had a band, or actually a couple of bands in high school. We played there was a talent show that they had every spring. So I was I was one of maybe only 2 bass players at the whole school. So I got to play with 3 or 4 different bands at the high school talent show. And this was a high school where, I was not a popular kid by any means. I was kind of a gawky, tall, weird kid. And they didn't like me too much. It was a very athletics oriented kind of school. So at this gymnasium show, talent show, these kids who kind of actively hated me were screaming with approval. They loved the music, they loved the band. And I was like, hey, wait a minute, this is a complete reversal of fortune, from everything I had experienced up to that time. So I kind of, decided to sort of see if I could pursue that, as something, as a, not as a measure of acceptance, but as a measure of, maybe not being hated or hazed or whatever. So when I got to Tulane, I started playing in various bands, kind of freelancing, kind of, but I played all the big clubs in New Orleans. I played Jimmy's, I played Tipitina's, I played the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. The first sort of big kind of name gig I got down there was backing up Bo Diddley.
Oh, wow.
In those days, he tended to travel with just himself, and he would use a pickup band in the cities where he was performing.
Sounds like Chuck Berry back in the days, too.
Chuck Berry used to do exactly the same thing. He used pickup bands. So I knew the booking agent at the time. I said, give me an audition. Give me an audition. I really, I put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. And it was kind of the hubris of youth, but it was also fortunate because Bo's music is harmonically very simple. Most of his songs are just one chord that sort of repeats over and over again. And my sense of rhythm was pretty good, but my harmonic knowledge was very limited. But that's enough for a Bo Diddley gig. So I got to back him up 3 different times when he came through New Orleans over a period of a couple of years. And started to sort of make sense. Like maybe this is something I could do, going forward.
From amateur club days to all of a sudden backing up Bo Diddley, I would start thinking that too. Hey, maybe there's a little bit here. I could go with this.
Maybe, yeah. Again, the hubris of youth, served me well because I felt that it was something I could do. Also, I remember too at that time, because I was playing in nightclubs and I was, developing some ability, not a lot, but like starting to get my feet under me as a functional bass player, especially like on a blues gig or something. And I remember seeing Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers during that time. They were doing an arena tour and they were backing up Bob Dylan.
Wow!
So they would do a Heartbreaker set and then they would play behind Dylan. That was the night, right? So I remember watching Howie, who was the bass player in Tom Petty at that time, and I was thinking to myself, I could do that. Everything, he didn't seem to be playing all this really complicated stuff. He seemed to be doing stuff that I could presently do. Mm-hmm. And I was able to sort of envision I could do that. I could totally do that. Now, what I know now, 30 years later, what he was doing was incredibly difficult in terms of being able to stand on stage in front of 20,000 people and play with that deep of a pocket, with that much integrity in rock and roll. It's incredibly difficult to do. It's not a gimme at all. But again, the ignorance and hubris of youth, I'm like, I could do that. Yeah, maybe I could figure it out. So sometimes it's good to not know what you don't know at the time.
I think that if everyone had that knowledge, they would just be too daunted to even try it most of the time. So I feel you.
Agreed. Yeah. If I knew now what I knew then, or if I knew then what I know now, yeah, I never would have said, no, that's not for me. I can't do that.
Still be working the marketing side instead?
Maybe, or, doing something else completely different, because I definitely felt like I hit the wall with the record company, the publicity game. I'm like, I just don't want to do it. It wasn't my thing at all.
When you get to that point where a job is sucking your soul, you can decide it's probably time to move on. I wish more people did that too.
Yeah, I'm with that. And also for me, hitting the wall helped me to realize that there's really nothing else that I wanted to do, which was to try to be a musician. And that's a difficult realization because it's a tough mountain to climb. And there's no guarantee of, any success or even just being able to survive paying bills with it, So, that's a tough one. And I was able to sort of even going to music school and saying, all right, now I know I needed to get this core training together. But even with my Berkeley degree, which I have down here in my file folder, which no one has ever asked me to see in 30 years, because having a degree doesn't get you a gig ever,
My degrees meant shit in all of my work too, so I feel you.
Exactly. And it means even less in the music field. It's like, do you have a degree in music? Who cares? Can you play the gig?
Can you play? That's what we want to know.
Right. Can you do it? Right. So even with the degree, I knew like there's no guarantee I'm going to be able to turn this into, rent money. And it took a while. It took about, when I got back to New York after Berkeley, it took me 3 years of being a temp secretary. I was typing resumes for the people that the phone company was laying off at the time. It was a weird karma job, and I, because I knew anything about word processing and computers at the time, and I did that. Yeah, I did that for 3 years until the music income and also freelancing at night and trying to do gigs as much as I could. And then after 3 years, like the balance just finally started to tip where I was able to, to make the leap of faith and go full time with the music. And that was 27 years ago. So
Wow.
I haven't had a day job since.
27 years in the music industry. So that would have been 95?
95. That's my birthday week, 95. That's when it happened.
Oh, wow. That's a good freaking birthday present.
Yeah.
So what was the toughest part of the transition for you? Was it the money or which part, I guess?
Well, I mean, when you're a kid, having money or living frugally is not that big a deal, and just, sleep on a futon on top of milk crates. That's fine. It kind of seems romantic and interesting at the time,
Who cares about your back? It doesn't matter yet. You're young.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're young, you're heel, So, no, I guess it's kind of a big leap of faith because, the entire society and the entire world is pushing you towards doing something professional, be a doctor, be a lawyer, or in my case, be an engineer, that kind of thing. Have a real job, something with income security and a pension and all these things. And, when you go into the freelance music game, you give all of that up because the day after you play Carnegie Hall, you're unemployed again. So, and that's every gig, you're unemployed until the next thing. So,
man,
you have to reorganize the way that you tolerate that kind of variability in income and busyness and all that kind of stuff to sort of be able to survive it.
So, you said Carnegie Hall. Have you played there, I'm guessing?
I played there twice, as a matter of fact, yeah.
Man, that is an accomplishment. Congratulations.
Yeah, I know. It's a big deal. Like one time I was listed as a featured soloist too, when I went in there.
Wow.
And when you walk in that stage, you feel it. You're like, you walk into the stage and it's heavy, because all of the masters of music have all set foot on that stage. And I don't necessarily think that I was worthy, but I played 2 shows there, sold out, different artists. So, I can say I did that.
That's awesome. So what is your favorite part of actually playing the gigs? Is it the crowd? Is it the energy? The music?
Well, it's a combination of all of that. And you have to do so many gigs to sort of have the opportunity for those things to all coincide in a positive way. You got to play a lot of crappy gigs. You got to play a lot of gigs with band members who don't necessarily listen or interact. You have to play gigs where nobody shows up. You have to play gigs where the sound system's awful. You have to do all these things. It's not, I mean, it's paying dues, but it's also like so many things have to go right for a transcendent musical experience to happen.
So many people involved behind the scenes and in front, and then you're just one person drops the ball, it can cascade along.
Yeah, it's all of that. It's all of that. I mean, you have to really have your craft together. All of your compatriots in the band have to have their craft together. Hopefully, it's a situation where you've had enough interaction time from playing enough gigs. Like usually the first gig, even if it's an all-star band, the first gig is kind of like, all right, that was fine. Like it takes a while to sort of gel, to sort of be able to interlock with everyone else's rhythms and their harmonies and their energy. And then you have to have the sound system that sounds right. The monitors have to be right. The crowd has to be a hot crowd. There's a thing like, I know from subbing on the Broadway shows, like same band, same cast, same music, same lights, same scenery. Tuesday night crowd is not a Saturday night crowd. It's a very different energy in the room, So like you need a hot crowd. You need like so many things have to go right before you kind of knock one out of the park.
I noticed that when I started doing a little bit on the comedy scene a little bit. If you're going to an open mic, it's a whole lot different than if you're going to a headliner. If you're, going on a Tuesday to a headliner, it's a lot different than a Friday when everybody's off work and going out to party. I can imagine the music scene being very similar.
It's very similar, yeah. Like, and even, I know from listening to my comic friends talk about, having the way the sound system is in the room, the way the acoustics are in the room. Like, if it's echoey or boomy or the sound system is muffling, what you're saying doesn't land in the right way. Like people don't hear it the right way.
Yeah.
I know I've heard comics say they don't like playing outdoor gigs because the sound just goes like straight up. Like you can't get, the energy across through the PA, through the mic. It's very similar with music too. Like it's much harder to get your point across.
So is that I'm just guessing, have you played Red Rocks then as well?
I have not. Not. But I've played venues like it. I've played outdoor sheds like it, but I know that's an acoustically beautiful space.
I was curious if that changed the dynamic a little bit.
It does, because those outdoors venues are called sheds because the stage is sort of covered with a corrugated roof kind of thing, and then there was usually a backdrop behind them, and then it goes out to a bunch of seats and then out farther to a lawn.
Gotcha.
So those venues are all across the country. They call them sheds. So like I just played. There's one in New Jersey called the Garden State Arts Center. Now I think it's called the PNC Bank Arts Center or whatever. And it's a 10,000 seat shed just like that. But because of the way those venues are set up, they know they have to have the firepower to cover the space. And usually there's a backdrop behind you, which sort of like helps project the sound forward, So like I always feel in those venues so far, every time I've been in them, that the point is getting across. Like, they've got enough juice in the PA to get the sound out there so people can actually hear it and enjoy it. And you could tell because the energy comes back. If the crowd's fired up and you hear 10,000 people screaming at you, you feel it. You can really hear it.
Oh, yeah. So do you have a favorite venue that you've played at?
Favorite venue? I don't know. There's been a whole lot of really good ones.
Some notables.
I mean, the aforementioned Carnegie was quite lovely. Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center. Fabulous room. I like those sort of mid-sized theaters.
Okay.
Those sort of seem like the best combination of things. Like you can get a lot of people in there, but not too many people that things can get out of control. Usually the sound is fairly controlled. Usually you can hear well on stage. Like, when you get into the arenas or the sheds we're talking about, things can get really boomy and separated and kind of, you can feel sort of floaty up there.
A lot more variables at those shows.
A lot more variables, and also they just don't sound, those rooms don't sound as good necessarily. They're getting better because of the way they fly the speakers with those graduated line arrays now. Mm-hmm. The sound is getting much better than they used to be when you used to go see arena shows, in yesteryear. But I remember, this is going way, way back to my record company days, as a matter of fact. I remember seeing the band Journey play in a hockey arena, the Meadowlands Arena out here in New Jersey. And I knew that they were sort of called arena rock, and I didn't really get the band. I wasn't a big fan. I was like, this sounds kind of commercial and produced, and I'm not sure what it is, but I remember seeing them, and the drummer did this fill, which was like bang, 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 ga-dun-dun. I was like, that just seems like a really simple, dumb fill to do. But what I realized when I saw it in the hockey arena, each one of those drum notes had time for the length of the hall reverb
to
get back to the stage. And I was like, I I see what they're doing. They tuned the music to the room, to the space.
So they actually sounded better in arenas.
It made complete sense what they were doing in an arena. I was like, oh, I see. It's built for that space. They were writing songs
Gotcha.
and producing those recordings to be played in a hockey stadium.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, it was a big revelation to me. I was like, oh, I get it. I see what's happening. But you have to see that. You have to see that and sort of experience it kind of from both sides. And again, there was a drummer friend of mine named Steve Holly, and he toured with a band called Paul McCartney and Wings.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Played with Joe Cocker for years. And I know him from New York City. I played with him, dozens of times, and I would see him play in nightclubs, like 150-seater nightclubs in New York, and he played a certain way. And then I remember seeing one of his bands playing in an outdoor stage that was in this cavernous sort of downtown thing, with the sounds bouncing off the buildings, and it was like the acoustics of an arena, a big echoey, boomy space. And suddenly he changed the way his hands hit the drums to match the acoustics of the space. And I realized he's got arena chops because he'd played with Paul McCartney, because he played with Joe Cocker. Like, he'd been in those rooms, so he knew you don't do this, you don't do this fast fiddly stuff. You got to do the big, obvious thing to make the sound communicate in the room. It was brilliant.
That takes a lot of skill and knowledge built over time to adjust your playing style on the fly.
It does, and just a lot of experience, I think.
Yeah.
Because I know from my own thing, playing in different size rooms, you have to play differently. If you're playing with a trio, you play very differently from if you're playing with an 8-piece band.
Mm-hmm.
There are more notes in the room. You have to leave more space. You have to sort of interact with things differently. Your functionality changes. But if you got like a power trio thing, suddenly you got to fill up more space. So you have to you have to play a lot more notes to sort of make the thing just kind of gel better. So it comes from experience, I think, from doing it.
Well, I think 27 years will give you a little bit of experience along that route.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few things at this point, so hopefully I make better guesses now when I show up to newer space. Hopefully, not always.
What was the last big gig you played?
The last big one was the aforementioned Garden State Arts Center.
Oh, nice.
I did a multi-act classic rock and roll show, and I was in the house band behind. I think it was a tribute to the Drifters. The Tokens, featuring Jay Siegel, the original lead singer, who had a big hit in 1961 called The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And then back it up, Frankie Avalon.
Oh, cool.
Who's just turned 82 years old.
Jeez, he's still touring. That's a good thing to be fucking doing at that age. Still
doing it. And Jay just turned 83 too, yeah. So, yeah, we're 10,000 of our closest friends in attendance. And I've played with the Tokens on and off for almost 30 years now. Not constantly, but I know them a long time. So I know at the end of the show, the last song is always going to be "The Lion Sleeps Tonight." The big.
Oh yeah,
the big hit at the end of the show. And then they sing the song and they start to walk off and they go like, wait. They come back on. The band breaks down. We're still playing the vamp behind and says, "All right, you guys want to sing along with us?" They do the same shtick every night because it works every night.
Oh yeah.
He said, "All right, I want you guys to sing lead. So I'm going to count you in, and on my cue, when I count to 3, I want everybody to go wee to sing the high note and Lion Sleeps Tonight, right?" So he says 1, 2, 3, and 10,000 people all went wee, and the room just like almost lifted up, 5 feet off the ground. And I was like, wow, what power, what energy, it was like the high point of the night. And I remember talking to Jay afterward. I said, "Did you hear that?" He's like, "Yeah, you felt it, in your bones, you feel it."
Well,
great.
Every time I hear that song, it's stuck in my head for a week. So thank you again. It's going to be stuck in there for a week.
It's a great tune. It's a folk tune. It's simple, beautiful, and it works every time.
Absolutely. All right, so that was your last big one. Let's hear one of your favorites or a couple of your favorites.
A couple of favorites. I wrote a book called "Am I Famous Yet?" Memoir of a Working Class Rockstar, and
we will have links to that in the show notes as well. Please check it out, and his website, people. Amazing stuff.
I thank you for saying so. And I detail in that book, one of my favorite shows was I think I want to say 2009, Tokyo Jazz Festival.
Wow. Okay.
I was music director for Sam Moore from Sam and Dave for 13 years. It's the guy saying, "I'm a soul man, hold on, I'm coming," all this kind of thing. So this was a show that was performing for 5,000 of our closest friends in Japan. We had a 15-piece band. I was playing bass. I was singing. I was conducting, singing background, I should say. And it was just one of those nights. Like, we had everything was dialed in, and it was on national television.
Wow.
So so I've seen actually footage of it. So I know that I wasn't just sort of imagining it. It was just one of those nights. Like the room was dialed in, the band was dialed in. We were so together that we were able to let Sam go out and just do his show, like do his thing. He didn't have to worry about us. We were just there to support him. And, the Japanese people are very traditionally kind of non-demonstrative and sort of like reserved and polite, as kind of a national character over there.
Different crowd than the U.S.
Usually, yes, except for Sam this night. They're openly weeping and screaming and singing along and kind of demonstrative, boisterous. It was amazing. It was transcendent, really, like a spectacular evening. And again, I saw the footage. Like, when I got off stage, I said, "Was that really as good as I thought it was?" And then I saw a film of it. And I'm like, yeah, that was a really good show. That was fantastic.
I love it. Any other big ones that jump out at you?
Yeah, and a lot of them happen to be with Sam too.
You said you were with them for 14 years, right?
13 years I was his music director and conductor. And I did a year on the road with Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. We had some pretty amazing shows with Martha too. But Sam, during that period of time, this is in 2006, was right in the middle of that era. He did an album on Rhino Records that was produced by Randy Jackson from American Idol.
Oh, yeah.
So Randy called all of Sam's rock star buddies and had them all come in and do duets on the record. So as in the process of promoting that record and touring behind it, I met Sting, Elvis Costello, Winona Judd, Travis Tritt, Bruce Springsteen, Paul Rogers. We ran into Robert Plant one time at a jazz festival, Bono, The Edge, like all these people. And because Sam came before all of them, and because he still sings, like he's 87 years old, he still sings amazingly. He has his true first tenor voice. No rock star in the world comes at him with any ego. They all come like bowing down to him, like because he's their Mount Everest,
Yeah.
He's that revered by them. And typically when I'm standing right next to him, like he said, "Oh, hey, this is Ivan, my music director," and I'm like, "Oh, hey, hi, Sting, hi, how are you?" So those kinds of things would happen with him over and over and over again. So like we played the first Obama inauguration.
Wow.
For an organization called the Creative Coalition, which was like Hollywood, all the Hollywood political types. So the audience was like packed with movie stars.
That's awesome.
And on stage, it was Sam Moore with special guest Elvis Costello and Sting. So I'm up there conducting this whole show. I detail this in the book too, and just sort of having a pinch me moment. And the big pinch me moment for me was back at the high school talent show I told you about, the first gig that I ever really played. One of the songs we played was "Message in a Bottle" by the Police. So a mere 27 years later, or whatever it was, I'm on stage in Washington, D.C. playing "Message in a Bottle" with Sting. And just trying not to freak out.
Your high school self was nearly shitting himself, I'm sure, at this point. I would have been anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I had enough experience at that time. I certainly could keep my wits about me and get my job done. But,
I'm sure.
Inside, you're going like, "Hey, man, that's Elvis Costello. That's and you're performing with them. I'm being paid
Yeah.
and hired specifically to perform with those people. Again, as Sam's special guest, but pretty special, pretty special.
The energy on those gigs must be something else.
Yeah. We kind of leave the stage about floating about 2 feet off the ground. Kind of just. And then that night, particularly, so it's January 20th in Washington D.C. That particular night, I think it was about 20 degrees outside.
Sounds about
Because
right.
it was so wildly well attended, Washington D.C. was booked to the point where they said there are no room at the inn for the band. So what they were going to do is put us on a train back to New York City overnight. But because the city was so completely packed and booked, there was no ride for us. There was no cab. There's no car service to get us back to the train station. So we just played this, one of the heaviest gigs of our lives. And we had to walk, about a mile and a half in 20-degree weather, holding our instruments with our wet clothes on to the train station because there was no way, there's no place for us to stay. And there was nobody that had organized. There was no ride to be organized for us. It wasn't available. So it kind of immediately brought us right back down to earth.
Well, from 2 feet above the air to right back in the wet, but it still sounds like one hell of a night.
Yeah, it was. But we landed pretty hard. It's like, okay, we're mere mortals,
So I do have to ask about some of the least favorite gigs. There's got to be some that were harder than others.
Oh, there still are. They happen every day, every week. It's most of them. Most of them are not gigs where things totally gel, where things go right. There's something nagging at you. There's a horn player who's out of tune, or there's a keyboard player who just doesn't listen and doesn't know the songs, or there's a drunk person screaming in your face. An audience member trying to be enthusiastic but just being an ass. Over and over and over again. Things tend to not go right. Or there's I doing a lot of private parties this summer because the pandemic shut down, so all the weddings got backed up.
Oh yeah, I was actually originally scheduled to get married that year the pandemic came out, and we're no longer together. So it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, but that happened to a lot of people. But things, they would postpone things. So suddenly now we're doing like double duty now, trying to get everybody married who's, or a lot of people got married anyway.
That's right. With no crowds, no bands, all that stuff out of the window.
Right. So, but we had, so we're having the reception 2 years later, that kind of thing. So we've been doing a lot of those, but you get persnickety party planners or, unpleasant maitre d's or that kind of stuff. I deal with that stuff all the time. It's very, very seldom that I just go up and, I'm going to have fun all night. It's going to be great. And everybody's happy. And, if they didn't pay me so gosh darn much money, I wouldn't stand for it. I tell you.
So on your website, as people go and take a look over there, I did notice, I was scrolling through, and was that a gold record I saw with your name on it?
Yeah, I've got several gold and platinum albums. However, interestingly enough, those are from my record company days when I was at Epic as a publicist. So I have Luther Vandross and Living Color and Joan Jett and the Blackhearts and all those kind of things. So those are not records that I played on. Those were all records for my clients that I got into the newspaper and hopefully tried to get them on the late night talk shows and that kind of thing. So
still a cool experience, but yeah.
Yeah, I got them. Didn't play on them. I have 2 Grammy nomination certificates up on the wall over here somewhere, and those are things that I actually did play on.
What were the nominations for?
One was for a best Latin jazz album for a percussionist, the late great Rafael Cruz, who was a dear old friend of mine. And the other one was a kind of a spoken word music album with music. It was with the great Pete Seeger.
Oh wow!
Who was telling stories, and a friend of mine, a percussionist named Jeff Haynes, produced this record, and there were like these instrumental beds that we were playing that were sort of going with the spoken word with music. And then at one point he started like reciting this poem, and Jeff had arranged the music to go with the poem. So suddenly, like, even though he wasn't really singing, he was intoning, and suddenly like I'm playing with Pete Seeger suddenly, and yeah, I got nominated for a Grammy, and I paid the $50 to get myself the certificate to frame on the wall.
Oh, of
Because you need
course.
the bowling trophies, man.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some other knickknacks you've accumulated over the years from your trips? Anything you really value?
Yeah. I've got I should flip my camera around here and show you. I've got this wall in front of me. Kind of looks like a shrine to me. It's a little embarrassing. It's a little weird. So it's a lot of gig posters. Some of my favorite ones with Sam and with Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, and an off-Broadway show I had the chair on called This Ain't No Disco was a fun. The gold records, all of the Broadway shows that I've subbed on, I've gotten autographed posters by the cast. They're up on the wall over there. And then a bunch of framed 8x10s, which I haven't kept up with the 8x10s, posting them on the wall so much because I don't know if you saw the website. There's quite an extensive photo album in there.
I did. I started taking a look through there.
Yeah, it's embarrassingly long. It's too much stuff. But because of my background in the publicity department of the record company, I learned very early on the power and the usefulness of those photographs.
Yeah.
So in those days, what we would do is at the label, we would hire a professional photographer to be backstage at, say, the Cheap Trick concert, right? So, and as a publicist, my job was sort of to be backstage, kind of coordinating all this stuff. After the show, what we would do is we would walk in one at a time, the guys from the radio station, the guys from the record store, the retail outlets, the people from the label, and then you put them in the shot with Rick Nielsen, take the picture, click, next, put the person in, and then we would print up the 8x10s and send them out to the people. So they would have these personalized mementos of having met these rock stars. And hopefully that would get them invested in wanting to then promote the product. Again, this was a marketing company, right? So at the end of those meet and greets, I would see, since I'd been there, like walking the people in and out, and I had hired the photographer myself as part, working from the label. I said, well, hey, let me jump in. Let me get a picture too. So I had all these, stacks of photos from my record company days standing next to the rock stars. But they weren't people that I played with. So I put them like in a box, and they went up in my dad's attic, and they stayed there for literally 30 years. I only found them about 3 years ago.
Wow.
And because in my mind, they didn't count, because what I wanted to have was the picture of the people that I actually worked with.
Different chapter of the life, different pictures.
Exactly. And when I refound them, again, this is 30 years on, I've got enough pictures of me standing next to the people that I actually did work with. Now, suddenly I saw a picture of me and Ozzy Osbourne. Now, I have no memory of ever meeting Ozzy Osbourne.
That's impressive, actually.
Well, and I'm a fan of Ozzy Osbourne. I know how it happened. I know where it happened, but I have no memory of it because he was on the same label. He was on Epic, but he wasn't one of my clients, So, but I'm sure there was a press party they had in Los Angeles. And I guess, again, the same thing with the photographer. And I said, let me jump in and get on. So I had a picture with Ozzy that I had no memory of. I had a picture with Alice Cooper that I had no memory of. I'm like, how do you not remember meeting Alice Cooper? How's
two of the
possible?
Biggest rock gods. Yeah, I mean, it's just a little thing,
right? And people that I'm fans of, like I remember some of them. Like I remembered I have a picture with Stevie Ray Vaughan, who I worked with.
Oh yeah,
and I remembered that it was in my dad's attic somewhere. I hadn't seen it in 30 years, but I knew it was up there. And I remember that I had there was a picture with Gene Simmons. There was a picture with Cyndi Lauper. There was a couple of things that I knew that I had stashed away somewhere. But then there was these other ones that I found like no memory at all. So now I count them as part of my journey, and they're interesting.
Absolutely, because without that chapter, you wouldn't be you. I mean,
yeah, it was a thing that I had to go through, and it was an interesting thing too. I mean,
absolutely,
I have pictures with all these other rock stars that I didn't necessarily play with. So they all got scanned and put on the website too. So now the photo album is unconscionably long. It's just too many pictures. But I also learned too, sort of in my travels, and my resume too, which you don't ever give a resume to anyone, but I do keep one, and it's listed the website, like all my credits are listed, and I keep them all up there because as you're first starting out, you put Bo Diddley at the top of the resume because he's famous, and then you
Oh,
put some
yeah.
other people and try to make it sound like you've done more than you necessarily have, right? And then as you sort of get farther down the road, you can kind of start to trim away some of the people who are less known or less famous or whatever. But I've left most of them on there because what I found is that you never know which artist is going to resonate with somebody who sees it.
And that can make the difference. Somebody that's like, oh, I want that guy to play with me. He's played with him.
Or just even a person that you meet in conversation. I can't tell you how many times somebody's come up to me and said something like, "Oh, wow, you played with Buster Poindexter?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I did." And of all those lists, that 7-page resume, that's the one that's jumped out at you. Cool, great.
All right,
let's talk about Buster.
I saw Sophie B. Hawkins on the list when I was going through there, among many others. But I saw that name, and that name stuck in my head from high school. And when her big hit came out, and my girlfriend is right there in my brain picking at me. And I'm like, oh, Sophie B. Hawkins, she just got another big song recently.
Sophie B. Hawkins. Now, I can tell you about that record. There was a recording date that I did. I never met Sophie. I was never in the same room with her. The record came out. I'm on it. I'm not credited. I can't prove it. I know which one it is, but I have a couple of those sorts of stories. But I absolutely played with Sophie B. Hawkins as far as I'm concerned. So, and that's cool. Exactly the example. Like that's the one that stuck out at you. Okay, cool, great.
Well, because there were more, but that one just now it's in my head. As soon as you said that, oh yeah, that one's stuck right there now.
Yeah, right. So that's why I leave it all up there because you just never know. That's going to be the conversation starter.
Very cool.
And each one of them's kind of a different story. And there are people like, as I was talking about with Sam Moore, who I work with for a long period of time over a number of years. And there are people like Sophie who I've worked with once and never met, but I'm on the record somewhere. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
That's very cool. So I am definitely curious. I'm going to actually pause for a second because there's a train going by.
I hear it.
I'll give it just a second as it blows its horn.
Right on.
What was one more of the random ones that you got to work with? One of those one-offs that stuck with you over the years?
There's a bunch of them. I mean, I'm reminded of this because last Wednesday I got to go see Iron Maiden play out here on Long Island, and I met Nico McBrain, who's the drummer in Iron Maiden, playing with Sam Moore, doing
That's
a soul
an interesting
music
place
gig.
to meet him.
Exactly. It's a very sort of unlikely pairing, but we were playing a charity event down in Florida with Sam, and the celebrity spokesmodel was Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden. And one of the things they were raffling off was one of his drum kits.
Oh wow!
That was it was a big high dollar sort of charity auction. But the whole point was drums as played by Nico, so we had to play them to sort of give them and autograph the drum heads to sort of give them the bona fides, right? So when we got to Sam's set, Nico sat in with us and played the entire set. And after the show, just a lovely guy. And after the show, like the band, we all went down to the lounge in the hotel, and there was a band playing there. And we just kind of took over, like, we're taking over. We're playing. You guys take a break. So we played soul music covers for like another hour, and Nico played with us for the whole hour of that too. Like he started apparently playing in soul bands in London back in the 70s.
How did he end up in Iron Maiden? That's a question I want to know.
Yeah, I know. Well, he was the new guy. He's only been there since 1982, right? He
the new guy.
He's the new guy. Actually, I think Yannick's a little bit newer. He's been there since 1989, but yeah. So like I'm looking at here. I got this is the VIP pass from the other night.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
And that's the VIP pass from 2016 when they played the Garden. Because because I play soul music now, I'm friends with Nico from Iron Maiden. So go figure.
That is a good story right there, sir. And
Yeah,
speaking
random.
of good stories, there are a shit ton of them in your book. You want to tell us another time about it real quick?
Sure. I wrote a book. It's called Am I Famous Yet? Memoir of a Working Class Rockstar, because that's how I consider myself. I work for a living. I lift my own amps. I drive my own car. Um, it's a collection of stories and anecdotes, from 30 years of just being on the road, standing next to rock stars. And then, road stories were just crazy or untoward things happen, because when everything goes right, there's really not much story to tell. Like, yeah, we had a great gig. Okay, cool.
Oh,
But when
yeah.
things break down, or things go really haywire, then you've got a story that you can sort of tell at the next gig. We'll be sitting around a dinner table between sound check and the show. Something weird will have happened that day, I'll invariably, it'll put me in mind of something else that happened weirder on another gig. So I'll start telling the table of people, like, listen, this one time we did such and such, and people were starting to tell me, like, you should really write these things down. I was like, maybe you're right, and I started to do that about, maybe 4 years ago. And I got it in pretty decent shape, but didn't really have time kind of put it down. And then suddenly, I don't know if you heard, but there was a global pandemic.
Oh, you mean like something that might stop you from playing once in a while?
We sat home for 15 months, and that gave me
Oof.
the opportunity to get the thing finished, formatted, edited, copy edited, the whole thing, and then put up on Amazon, which is where it resides to this day.
Well, very cool. And what about your website and other places for people to reach out to you? What's the best places?
Yes, links to everything, all of my socials, all of the book, everything is at funkboy.net, funkboy.net, not funky boy. There's no Y in the middle, funkboy.net. And yeah, it takes you straight to Amazon where the book is. It's got links to all my socials. It's got the link to the unconscionably long photo album. If you really can't sleep at night, you want to see pictures of me standing next to, 200, 300 different famous people.
It's pretty fascinating photo album, I have to admit.
It's interesting. Sometimes I look at it and I'm reminded, like, yeah, that all happened. Yeah, I was there.
Well, we will definitely be providing links in the show notes for everybody to take a look at. But Ivan, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I truly appreciate it and all of the amazing music you've shared. And I look forward to maybe even another conversation one of these days. It's been good to have you on.
Absolutely, anytime. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for sharing me with your friends in podcast land. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Right on. You too, man.
Thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Exchange, and I want to once again thank Ivan Bodley for joining us this week and sharing some of his amazing rock and roll journey. Last but definitely not least, I want to give a special thanks to all of our listeners. You are the reason I continue to make these podcasts and keep spreading the word about these amazing Awakened Vapes. Please tell your friends about us, follow us on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or wherever else you're listening, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Every podcast says that because it really does help with visibility. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. Thanks again for listening to Awaken Exchanges, and have a blessed day.